Welcome to FutureX, the podcast where we look to solve the variable that is the future of Web3. Every week, we'll talk with some of the brightest minds in the blockchain and Web3 space, from top investors to founders and builders, paving the way for a decentralized world. So what is the future of blockchain? What will Web3 look like in 2050? Let's explore together.
Welcome to FutureX, SynFutures podcast series highlighting some of the brightest minds in Web3 space. Today, we're very honored to have Sachi here, one of the founding members of Polygon Ventures. Hi, Sachi.
Hey, Rachel. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Please, could you first of all, introduce yourself and the fund to the audience here?
Yeah, for sure. So, my name is Sachi. Brief intro about myself. Prior to Polygon, was working in Wall Street for a couple of years. I was doing credit trading and then structured notes, over at Bank of America, BAML. Then I got into crypto, I would say about 2.5 years ago. Um, and that's how, I started my career at Polygon. I joined Polygon at a very interesting time. It was basically when um, they had just listed on Coinbase and they just rebranded from Matic to Polygon. So the company was really reaching an inflection point, and I would say it was it was the start of the bull market. So it was very great timing. I was one of the first people on the ventures team, so I was in charge of just setting up the general structure and framework for the ventures team. And since then, I've been investing in early stage, like pre-seed or seed type projects that are building on top of Polygon. So it's definitely been a great opportunity to just learn about the industry and just be hands-on in terms of understanding what's happening within the crypto markets.
Sure. You started your career at Wall Street, but then how do you first learn about Bitcoin and blockchain?
Yeah, so I mean, I had heard about crypto for a while. I had a couple of friends back in college who were setting up GPUs so that they could mine crypto. And actually, a couple of students also got in trouble at Caltech because they had set up some mining rigs in underground, and they were using Caltech's electricity in order to mine Bitcoin. So I have heard about it, and some friends were interested in it, but I never had actually gotten into it. But I would say it was about like 2.5 years ago when I met Sandeep. He was the one that convinced, and Sandeep is one the co-founders of Polygon. He's the one that convinced me that crypto would be the future. Like, he made this analogy about how you can think of Bitcoin as gold and Ethereum as basically replacing all the centralized institutions like the Fed and the banks and everything that's centralized now. And he's also a very convincing guy. So I think after he kind of shared that vision, I was like, okay, this is definitely the future. And I feel as though there's going to be a lot more opportunity in crypto versus TradFi. TradFi has been around for more than hundreds of years. Um, so then I decided to take a leap of faith, and that's how I ended up in Polygon. Sandeep at that point was looking to recruit not just inside of India, because at that point a lot of the employees were based in India, that he was also looking to recruit outside of India, especially the US. Honestly, the timing was great at that point.
Sure, interesting. So you started as a credit trader. I understand that as a credit trader, you need to analyze the companies, then and their bonds and different financial instruments as well. Do you find similarity trading as a credit trader
Yeah.
and now, yeah, yeah. And what is the
Yeah,
difference? Yeah.
yeah, definitely. I would say that a lot of the fundamental principles within traditional finance also apply in DeFi. Um, I would say DeFi is basically just money at the speed of light. So if you have like a pretty fundamental understanding of how traditional finance works, then it's much easier to understand what's happening within DeFi. Actually, I feel as though it definitely gives me an edge, because I feel as though I would say 80-90% of the people that are in DeFi don't necessarily have a finance background. Like they basically went straight into crypto and started to understand how options works or perpetual works while working in crypto. But I think it's really important to have a fundamental understanding of how options and securities works, because at least with traditional finance, if to understand these products, you also have to have a pretty solid understanding about risk management. And I feel as though in crypto sometimes there's no or very little risk management. Um, so I think it definitely does give you an advantage, because it helps me, understand a lot of the fundamentals within DeFi, but also understand, what are the how to manage risks, what are the regulatory uh also understand like what are the regulatory implications. So yeah, my traditional finance background has definitely helped me a lot to transition into the crypto space.
Sure. And as one of the early members, you must, as you just now also mentioned, that you've been involving, you were involving in lots of, fund setups and other, early ventures. Can you also share with us your journey there in Polygon in early days? What was the days look like? We know that Polygon is right now one of the largest chain in the world, but in early days, are there any interesting stories that you could share with us?
Yeah, definitely. So, I would say the early day of Polygon, I wasn't like super early, but I was definitely like on the earlier side, since I joined like, right after the rebranding from Matic to Polygon. Um, it was definitely a bit more disorganized and didn't have as much structure like any startup would, especially once they're reaching like an inflection point in growth. There was not as much structure, but as a result, there was definitely a lot of opportunity to grow. Um, so yeah, with this ventures fund, there wasn't even like when I joined, like I mentioned, there wasn't really even the idea of a venture fund. It was more so the business development team was ad hoc putting in tickets into projects based on what they thought was strategic for the business development team. But I felt as though we should have a more so methodical way in order to assess these projects, not just considering, what is the value that it could bring from a business development standpoint, but also think whether it would make sense long term from a investment standpoint. So, when I first started, the first thing I did was set up a general investment committee. So, I chose a couple of people from the business development team along with me to be part of this investment committee to discuss every 2 weeks or every week different projects that we saw that we thought would be an interesting opportunity for the ecosystem fund. And that's how, the venture process kind of started. I was also in charge of, you know, once you invest, you also have to do the legal you also have to do the legal side of things, right? So reviewing the documents, actually signing the documents and then sending the capital. So I was in charge of also setting up that general process. And then eventually, uh, it became clear that we needed more people because initially I was basically just managing the whole thing. So, we hired more people. The team, luckily now, is about 8 people, which is nice. Half the team focuses on operations, then the other half focuses on like actual deal sourcing, due diligence, and presenting to IC. I specifically focus on like consumer type applications. We have two people that focus on infrastructure slash DeFi, and then we have 2 people that focus on gaming. So, um, yeah, initially it was definitely a bit chaotic because there wasn't that much structure, but it was definitely a great opportunity for me to learn. But now I would say it's a lot more structured. We have a specific process that we have to follow when it comes to presenting to the investment committee. But it's great because now we have to write investment memos, and I think that writing an investment memo is a great opportunity for all our teammates and also me to understand truly like how the product or the project works and dig really deep into it. So yeah, that's a general overview of, how we started the venture fund and where it is now.
And since you have mentioned out of curiosity, are there any stories behind the name change of Matic to Polygons? Yeah.
Yeah, to be honest, I wasn't involved with the specific name change, other than I remember I met Mihalo. Mihalo is one of the co-founders of Polygon. I met him right before he had just joined Polygon itself. Um, I mean, the name change Polygon makes a lot of sense because initially, when Matic started, they thought that the future of scaling Ethereum would be Plasma, and that was the only solution that they had. They had like a Plasma solution, but then eventually they realized after like 6 months or so that the future of scaling Ethereum is not Plasma, but it's in fact zkVM and other solutions like which is our POS solution and also our SuperNet solution. So I think Polygon represents this in the sense that a polygon has multiple sides to its shape, similar to how Polygon, the company itself, has multiple solutions that developers can pick and choose when they want to build on top of the blockchain. So I think Polygon definitely represents that vision much better versus Matic.
Yeah, definitely. We love the name. And one of the questions that I myself always have is how do you balance between investing into projects that could help Polygon ecosystem? So that's a strategic investment, right? Versus investment that is purely out of the financial purpose and looking for financial return. And I think there might be some difference. And in between the days when you first started Polygon Venture and today, right? Because today we understand that Polygon has closed, I think, 500 million funds led by Sequoia, Lightspeed, SoftBanks, and
Yeah.
Tigers, among other notable VCs. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of how we balance between financial investments versus business development investments, I would say initially when we first started the ecosystem fund, we were more skewed towards making investments based on business development decisions. But we were still very valuation sensitive. Like I would say 80% of our projects that we invested in made sense from like a VC standpoint, and then 20% were more so business development. Um, but slowly over the years, as Polygon has been able to bootstrap its ecosystem, we've shifted more towards like 95% of our projects are VC based and 5%, less than 5% are business development based. Um, and that's because, the ecosystem has changed over time. I think because the ecosystem is bigger, we can also focus on like higher quality projects versus having to win projects by providing capital. So yeah, I mean, initially when we first started the fund, some interesting investments that we made was, for example, Magic Eden. Magic Eden, when we were spoken to them back then, they were the biggest NFT marketplace on Solana. They basically had like 90% market share within the NFT space in Solana, but they realized that since they basically have the entire market in Solana, they needed to expand to other chains. So they were talking to Ethereum. They were also talking to Polygon to potentially expand. And at that point, from a business development standpoint, it made a lot of sense because at that point only OpenSea was launched on Polygon. There were a couple of other NFT marketplaces as well, but there wasn't one that had the right like UI UX like Magic Eden did. And they were also focusing on gaming, which at that point, about a year ago, gaming was really, really hot. And I don't think we didn't have like a specific launchpad, a gaming launchpad on Polygon that we could recommend a lot of these projects to go to. Magic Eden at that point was raising at like about 1.5 billion valuation. Electric Capital Electric Capital ended up leading the round along with Lightspeed was one of the investors. So even though I would say that investment didn't make sense from a valuation standpoint, it made a lot of sense from a business development standpoint. So that was a project that I was super excited about. I thought, and the founders are great. Like Jack is a really great founder. Like he used to work at Facebook, then he worked at FTX, and then he looked to launch Magic Eden. So huge fan of Jack. Um, and similar story with Layer Zero as well. When we were speaking to them about a year ago, they were raising at like a billion valuation with some big investors like Sequoia, and I think FTX was in there as well. But yeah, I mean, Layer Zero made a lot of sense from a business development standpoint, just because bridging was a big narrative at that point, and it made sense for us to put in a small ticket. Um, but yeah, I would say like nowadays those type of investments, like investing in a billion valuation type projects, is few and far in between. We now, I would say, prefer projects that are less than 50 million in valuation, pre-seed or seed, ideally. And we really focus on looking at good founders that have a lot of potential. And also we look at products that are unique and are not necessarily a copycat of what already exists out there, unless there's a significant improvement in the product itself. Um, so yeah, I mean, the process has gotten much more streamlined as well. Now we have to write back in the day when we first started the fund, just because we didn't have bandwidth, we didn't write as many investment memos. Unfortunately, we just had like short notes to support why we wanted to invest in this project. But now we have to write a full-fledged memo in order to present to the investment committee. So that's really helped us organize our thoughts and be able to present our investment thesis when we present to the investment committee. Yeah, in terms of the 500 million raise that we did with all these VCs, I would say like the timing was really great. The conversation started about mid 2021. And that was right when the market was starting to pick up a lot. Bitcoin was starting to reach an all-time high towards the end of the year. And a lot of these investors, such as like Sequoia, Tiger, SoftBank, saw that there was a lot of potential with blockchain, but they weren't necessarily sure where to invest. So, Polygon at that point um, realized had actually not raised any capital before then. Like if you look at its capital raising history, the first raise was done with a few small VCs, including like Binance and Coinbase. There weren't really other notable VCs. And then they did a launch pad with Binance, and they were able to raise about 10 million then. But in total, they had only raised about like 11 million or so from VCs. So we didn't really have like a strong VC backing, similar to what some of the other blockchain projects had. Like I would say Solana, had all the big investors like Multicoin, and FTX and such, and that has really helped them push their product and also push adoption of Solana. And I think Polygon saw that and realized that they didn't necessarily have that just because we didn't have the VC backing. So that's why Sandeep realized like we should have this raise so that these VCs can help us long term, whether it be growing our ecosystem or attracting the right projects onto Polygon. I think one of the reasons why Polygon ended up winning in the gaming space is because we were really close with some of the top gaming funds, such as like Makers or Play Ventures or Griffin. So a lot of these funds end up referring their gaming projects or portfolio projects that they've invested in onto Polygon. So that's kind of the general reasoning why we decided to do this 500 million raise. It was because Polygon had not had a big raise before then, and we didn't have like a very strong VC backing. And the co-founders realized the importance of having like some support from these VCs, because these VCs can also attract some of their or refer some of their portfolio projects to build on Polygon.
Yeah, definitely. And So you mentioned about valuation. I think the other day, Paul from Pantera also released a notes, and during an interview that he saw that I think pre A's seed round valuation keep roughly, I mean down a little bit, but it's almost the same. But I think like B plus C rounds saw great discount, right? So what have you been seeing in the funding market right now? I mean, in terms of valuations and change during the past year, as well, whether you have received more or less applications right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like you mentioned, growth rounds like Series B or C are definitely struggling a lot with raising capital. In fact, unfortunately, they have to raise a down round. Um, so for growth projects, for growth rounds in general, it's definitely very tough for projects to raise. For Series A and below, I feel as though valuations have definitely come down a lot versus compared to a year ago. But I think it's still a great time to raise. What I've noticed is um, projects that have, great founders and a unique product are still able to raise at a pretty reasonable valuation. Um, in fact, there's a project that we're assessing where the founders are very strong and uh, they have a very unique product. They're able to raise from very big VCs and at a pretty expensive valuation. So, I think a lot of these funds, such as, for example, Hom Ventures, they raised 1.5 billion to invest in crypto. Or there's also A16Z that I think they also raised about a billion or 1 billion or so to invest in crypto. These funds are still actively looking for projects to invest in. So if you're like a great founder building a unique product or a great product, then I think it's still a great time to raise, even though the capital markets haven't been great broadly. Um, yeah, in general, I would say the projects that um, the projects in the growth rounds or the projects that don't have as strong as the founder have definitely been struggling to raise capital in general. But I wouldn't, if you're looking to raise now and you're building a great product, then I think it's still a good time to raise. So I encourage anyone to go ahead and and raise capital.
Good news.
Mhm.
And what about in terms of different sectors? Are you seeing, I mean, like any sectors that's emerging or that any interesting ideas that you see in the markets? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say in general, as Polygon Ventures, we've been seeing a lot more infrastructure type projects. Um, so and that could be brought, and we've also seen very interesting like decentralized social applications. Like you guys have probably seen Lens, which is built on top of Polygon, and they are bootstrapping their ecosystem. There's a lot of decentralized social applications that are building on top of Polygon, on top of Lens, which is built on top of Polygon. So we've definitely like evaluated some projects there. On the DeFi slash infra side, we've seen a couple of like SaaS products, and also bridging products. So in general, I think the markets haven't been able to figure out what's the next, theme, which is why a lot of people have been, focusing on investing in infrastructure. Um, uh, Gaming in general has definitely slowed down compared to a year ago. I would say a year ago, 60 to 70% of our investments were gaming, but now I would say maybe like 20 or 30% or so are in gaming. A lot of projects are struggling to raise capital, especially in the gaming space, just because I think people in the Web3 space didn't realize how expensive it is to how expensive it is to create a high quality game. So unfortunately, it's definitely a very tough time for some of these gaming projects, but the really good, exciting ones, such as like Shrapnel, for example, have have been um, have still been able to raise capital. So yeah, I would say as of now, the theme now is infrastructure and we've continued to invest in infrastructure type projects through the ecosystem fund.
I think one of the confusions that lots of people encounters that what really meant to be, I mean, an infrastructures from the VC point of view, right? Is infrastructure purely referred to public chain and all those chains? I mean, I think like all those infras, sort of data service providers, or do you view like protocols that could empower other projects as type of infrastructures? Yeah.
Um, I think it I mean, I think the definition of infrastructure can be pretty broad. Like, infrastructure could also mean, like, improving the whole, uh, like, developer onboarding process for gaming projects, for example, or or increasing or increasing the liquidity between protocols, uh, using bridges. Yeah, I mean, I think the definition of infrastructure can be pretty broad. It can also be like a ZK rollup. So, my definition of infrastructure is broad.
Sure. And I mean, I think, yeah, I think one of the unfortunate facts that we're seeing, I mean, is that, I mean, consumer base and, I mean, large scale adoption has still ways to go, right?
Yeah.
So people has been asking what is the real user cases out there in on blockchains, and from your point of view, what is the bottlenecks, and what do you view as the next possible exciting, I mean, user scenario for the general audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally for mass adoption of blockchain or just crypto in general, the blockchain has to be invisible. So the people should know that, something is powered by the blockchain, but whenever they're using the product itself, they shouldn't feel as though they are on the blockchain, because I think the user experience now is like terrible. Like, if you go onto MetaMask and sign a transaction, that whole process is not intuitive, especially if you're not technical or in crypto. So I think a lot of that has to be abstracted out. So I think Polygon has actually done a really good job in terms of increasing adoption of crypto. A specific example of this is on the loyalty platform side. Polygon and Starbucks did a partnership where they would launch the Starbucks loyalty program on Polygon, and that whole user experience is very smooth. Like, you don't feel as though it's powered by the blockchain, unless you click on the NFT itself, which takes you to the Nifty Gateway. But even then, you don't have to set up a wallet in order to interact with that Starbucks loyalty platform. So I think that's one specific example of how we're bringing the masses into the blockchain. Another really great example is the Reddit NFT launch. So Reddit launched their NFTs, I would say, about a year ago. If you actually go use it, you never really interact with a wallet itself. You basically set up a vault where you can pick your own password. You don't have to necessarily save your seed phrase. Your seed phrase is like saved on the cloud, and you just like you pick a standard password in order to set up your wallet. And then the process of like buying an NFT on Reddit is super easy. Like, you don't have to transfer Bitcoin or Matic or Ethereum into your wallet. You can just use an Apple Card, or you can use Apple Pay in order to buy that Reddit NFT. Um, so that's also another example of how I think we can potentially bring the masses into crypto. Um, I think the next cycle will really involve us and developers and builders to focus on creating a UI UX experience that's super smooth, where people don't feel as though they're interacting with the blockchain. In fact, the blockchain should be completely invisible, and people should just know that it's powered by Polygon. But that whole process should be, the whole process of buying an NFT or just interacting with the blockchain should be completely invisible.
Yeah, I personally tried it and loved the experience as well. Thanks for
Yeah.
the Yeah. And yeah, I mean, next I would love to really talk about, I mean, yourself as a female leader in the space, right? And I mean, SynFutures here at FutureX would love to also talk to more female founders, investors, to find out more about the women's opportunity in the space. And for you, I mean, like, do you see more female just founders, investors coming into the space lately? Or I mean, like, do you think that's, I mean, the traditional, I mean, working environment difficulty, say the harassments, pay inequality still exists in the Web3 space? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely tough for women to break into the crypto space, just because I feel as though there's definitely a high barrier to entry. And I think in general, maybe I'm biased, but I feel as though like women are held on to higher standards versus men. Or at least like when I see some women in the
As
space,
a woman,
especially
definitely, let me agree with you as a female.
yeah, like especially like I don't know, when I see like fund managers or just women in general in crypto, I feel like I'm always impressed by them because they tend to work at a higher pace or just like a higher standard than the men I've seen within the crypto space. So like I mentioned, the barrier to entry I think is a lot higher for women versus men. But in general, I feel as though I've been super fortunate to be surrounded by mentors or colleagues that are very supportive about having women in the crypto space. Like, for example, Sandeep, he says in general, like there's just not enough women in Web3, and he encourages his wife, Hashida is a founder of TimeSwap, and obviously he's been super supportive of his wife going into Web3. Um, he's also been very supportive of me being in Web3 and also just teaching me about Web3 and mentoring me about how to become more of a degen. And I think having people like that within the Web3 space, it has definitely helped me a lot. So and I think in general, it's I think in Web3, people understand that not having enough females in the space is a problem. So, um, I think a lot of people have put in a lot of energy and effort into just like making the women that are already in Web3 comfortable and help them succeed, which is great. Um, I think, yeah, and Polygon itself has also been conscientious of it. They've been actively trying to hire more women within leadership roles and also just roles in general. So I feel as though I'm very fortunate to be in Polygon, where they encourage both men and women to succeed within the Web3 space. Um, but nonetheless, I still feel as though we still have a long way to go. Like whenever I go to these crypto conferences, or even worse, like if you go to these Web3 gaming conferences, there's virtually, at least in crypto conferences, like there's at least 2 out of 10 people are women, or 3 out of 10 people are women. But if you go to a gaming Web3 conference, it's basically like virtually no women in the space. So yeah, I mean, I think we still need a lot more women in the space. Ideally, it would just be like 50-50. And I'm also happy to encourage people or just like mentor people in general that want to jump into the Web3 space.
Yeah, but do you feel like Web3 could offer more opportunity for women versus traditional finance? Or, I mean, like generally, I mean, the barriers is sort of like the structural and it's just similar. Yeah. And why? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel as though traditional finance, there's not as many. I mean, there are opportunities, and I think they're more cognizant about the gender gap. So in a sense, like maybe there are more opportunities in TradFi just because they're a lot more conscientious about the difference in ratio between men and women. But I think there's more. I personally feel as though there's more opportunity in crypto just because it's like basically it's like a blue sea. And the industry, I feel as though it has a lot of potential to grow for the next 5-10 years or so. And I feel as though there's definitely a lot more potential for upward mobility for an industry that is growing versus TradFi, I would say, is a lot more structured. It's been around for hundreds of years, and there hasn't really been that much innovation for the past 5, 10, 20 years or so. So I think overall, there's just a lot more opportunity in crypto versus traditional finance.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, on the other hand, do you see, I mean, any, I mean, unique advantages that women could bring into the space? For example, for yourself, in terms of investments, do you feel like as a female investor, uh, it gives you more, I mean, advantage, or actually, no, you have to live up to even higher standards. You have to become a good investor. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think at least for me, I feel as though I've always had to push myself hard in the face of adversity. And as a result, I end up becoming better at whatever I'm pursuing, like whether it be my career or in investing, because I have to push myself harder, I end up becoming a better investor. So I think overall it's been like a great opportunity for me. And I think it's the same with other women as well. Like, because they're held at a higher standard, they really have to push themselves a lot harder. But then as a result, they become better versus the average investor. I think like even though, women in general, I think are held at a higher standard, I think it's overall good for the women that are already in the Web3 space because, it already sets up high expectations um it's great for other people to have that impression of women as well.
Yeah, sure. Then, are there any advices that you will give to women who's interested in joining Web3?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is to continue asking questions and not be afraid about asking questions. I think that can probably be one of the scariest things about going into crypto is that um, you feel as though you can't be vulnerable and ask questions. So I think that's number one, really important. And then number two, I think it's really important to actually try the protocols. Go into like actually bridge assets into ZK Sync and then try their dexes or try to mint an NFT. I think 80 or a lot of people that are in crypto like don't actually try the protocols themselves, and they don't actually understand what are the pain points within crypto. So I think if you're willing to actually go into the protocols and try it yourself and really understand the product, that puts you at a at a much greater advantage versus a lot of the other people that are already in crypto.
Yeah, so try it out first, right?
Yeah.
Um, Thank you. And before we let you go, can you talk more about your visions of the futures and how blockchains could look like in the next few years, and even, in the next 10 years? And we know that everyone's been discussing AI and blockchains. Do you see any, opportunity for the two to shape the world? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in terms of blockchain, like I mentioned before, I think it's really important for us to actually reach mass adoption. And in order to do that, I think we need to focus on the very basic use cases. So I think we should have like a Venmo equivalent within Venmo or crypto equivalent. Venmo or PayPal equivalent within crypto. So I think payments is something that could definitely be improved using the blockchain. Um, Loyalty platforms is also another example of a consumer use case, which I think blockchain can significantly improve. And digital collectibles or NFTs is also like the specific use case of Reddit is a good example of how we can reach mass adoption of crypto. So in general, like, I've been focusing on investing in and also evaluating projects that could potentially bring crypto to the masses. Um, in terms of how I think AI and blockchain could potentially merge, I think the problem with AI right now is that a lot of it is centralized. OpenAI basically owns all these language models, and same with Google too, with their AI model Bard. But I think that could potentially cause a lot of problems just because they have control over these AI models, and potentially they could also restrict who are the people that can use these models, or they can also, or we've already seen this problem with censorship, right? Like a lot of these AI models itself are being censored, and as a result, they don't provide the right output, or some people even consider them woke, where they only say things that are politically correct, which I don't think is the right. I don't think this is the right direction for AI models in general. And I think blockchain could potentially solve this problem, because blockchain in general is decentralized, right? And people broadly can need to come to a consensus to for how like a specific model should work. So I think having a decentralized AI model makes a lot of sense, because people broadly can decide, how an AI model should work. It would also be decentralized, so it's not like a centralized institution would censor or restrict people from necessarily using that AI model. So I think that's a specific potential use case for AI and blockchain.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for all the insights. Yeah. And thanks for, Polygon's great support to the whole ecosystems and the change that it bring to the blockchain world. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much, Rachel, for having me. It was a pleasure being on this podcast.
Thanks for listening to the FutureX podcast. Subscribe on Spotify or wherever you're listening to this episode.